My name is Henry Weston. I am 36 years old at the beginning of this story and have been married to my sweetheart Jenny for 16 years. We have a 14-year-old daughter named Juliana. My height is about 180 centimeters and my weight is about 200. Mostly muscle gained from 18 years as a commercial and residential electrician. School was never my passion. I managed to graduate from high school, but working with my hands was what I was really good at. I had a hard time staying still in class, so I got a lot of trouble for being disruptive. I wanted to do something, not sit still and listen. So right after high school, I took a job with a local contractor as an apprentice electrician. 4 years later, I easily passed the journeyman's exam, and 2 more years later, at the ripe old age of 24, I got my master's license. In my opinion, I'm a smart guy, but I don't like learning from books. I wanted to start my own business after I got my master's degree, but Jenny didn't want to take any chances. We had a young daughter, and Jenny was a stay-at-home mom, and she really liked having a steady check to rely on. So I continued to work at Alpha Electrical Contractors. I was making a good living. We were able to buy a house, and we each had a car, which we were now paying for in full. We were able to go on vacations, pay all our bills with no problem, and we had money left over for entertainment. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, we were happy, and we loved each other. Well, at least I did. My best friend growing up was Tom. We met in Mrs. Collins's 3rd grade class when his family moved next door, and from that day on, we were practically inseparable. We played sports together, went on double dates, and in high school, we even got jobs at the same fast food restaurant. Tom was more of a smart guy. While I was pulling cable and bending pipes as an apprentice electrician, he was getting a business degree from Stanford. While I was working on my master's degree, he was getting his MBA. He has a great job, even though he works long hours and makes a lot more money than I do. But he is single and lonely, so he spends a lot of time with me and Jenny. We've tried to make a relationship with him, but nothing has come of it. He comes over for dinner a few times a week and often talks about how jealous he is of my family. Money can buy a lot of things, he said, but you can't buy the love of a family. I agreed with him every time. I loved my wife, and my daughter was the apple of my eye. My daughter and I were very close. I taught her a lot, even though I had much higher hopes and dreams for her myself. But, I reasoned, it never hurts to know a thing or two about electrical repair. Next chapter. My world came crashing down in August. When I got home from work, I found Tom's car in the driveway. This wasn't unusual because, as I said, he often came over for dinner and sometimes ended up at my house before I did. Usually when I entered the house, Juliana was the first to greet me. She would hear my truck pull up to the house and would be sure to wait for me at the door. It didn't happen every day, but often enough, so when I walked through the door and she wasn't there, I'd ask Jenny where she was so I'd know. "She's at Danielle's," Jenny replied. I noticed the look on her face. Tom was sitting on the couch, and the look on his face was exactly the same. Something was definitely wrong. "What's going on?" I asked. And then Jenny uttered those 4 words that every man dreads hearing from his wife. "We need to talk." Having just come home from an open construction site in the middle of August, I was pretty disgusted. "Okay. Do you mind if I take a shower first?" Jenny nodded, and I continued on to the bedroom and showered. I pondered the possibilities. Could she be pregnant again? It had been a while since we'd talked about kids, and in fact, we'd discussed a lot of things we could do when Jules left home. We hadn't had anything in a few weeks. Something kept getting in the way, or she just wasn't feeling well when I tried to initiate. But it hadn't been more than 6, 8 weeks, so the math worked. So if she accidentally got pregnant, that would certainly be cause for concern, though I hoped she knew I would be happy to have another baby. But why did Tom have to be here for that? Maybe she'd told him first to see how I'd react. Maybe someone was seriously ill. I had no family. All my grandparents were dead. My father died when I was 11, and my mother died about 10 years later. They divorced when I was a toddler due to my mother's infidelity and my father's inability to come to terms with it when she finally left. My father was killed in a car accident, crashing headfirst into a tree. He was completely sober, and there were no skid marks on him. Later, I didn't realize what that meant. Perhaps one of Jenny's parents or her younger sister Liz had problems. I conceded that it could be Jenny or Tom themselves, but figured I should have learned something by now. Obviously, this was just speculation, and there was nothing left to do but go downstairs and find out what was wrong. I got dressed and joined them in the living room. In retrospect, I should have noticed that they were sitting side by side on the couch, and I was sitting alone on the chair, but it didn't occur to me at the time. Henry, you are a wonderful man and have been a faithful husband and hard-working provider for so long, Jenny began. This was not a good start. Henry, Tom and I have fallen in love with each other. I'm sorry, but I'm asking for a divorce. And if I had ever imagined what it would be like to be hit in the chest with a cinder block, what I felt at that moment would be very approximate. I was stunned, but the words weren't coming. So Jenny kept talking. I hope we can do this the easy way. We would like to stay here so that Juliana can continue at the same school. I don't want to disrupt her life any more than necessary, but we just can't go on like this. I managed to find my voice. You slept with him? I managed to ask. She bestowed a wry smile on me, and her answer was a knife in my back. Of course I slept with him, Henry. I was still trying to recover from the blow to my soul I had just received. I had always thought we were happy together. Sure, we had our problems, like all couples do, but nothing that would cause a breakup. My mind went into overdrive, trying in vain to find something that would make her turn her back on another man. We had been together for over 20 years, more than half of our lives. There had to be something, but I didn't think anything of it. I couldn't believe this was happening to me. It was only through Tom's attempt to intervene that I finally regained the power of speech. Henry, listen! No! I roared in a voice that surprised even me. You're never talking to me again, you son of a bitch! Consider yourself warned, Tom. If a word comes out of your mouth against me, I'll kill you and gladly spend the rest of your life in prison for it. Nod if you understand. He nodded. Tom was in a suit and not particularly muscular. I could snap him like a branch if I wanted to, and he knew it. You don't have to be like that, Jenny interjected. Let's try to be as civil as possible, please, Henry. I need to be like this, and I am being as civil as possible. I'm the one who was betrayed and trampled on, so screw you and whatever you think about how I should react. I spat out after her. And I'm taking custody of my little girl, not you. Henry, I understand you're upset, but I'm not giving up custody of Juliana, said Jenny. We can work out a fair visitation schedule so you can spend a lot of time with her, but she will stay with us so that her life can be as normal as possible. You'll work long hours and I'll still stay home. Screw that. God, I was eloquent. You don't understand a damn thing. She's my kid too. I haven't spent the last 18 years working my ass off to support my family, to be a part-time father, because the whore I married decided to trade me in for someone with a big bank account. I guess that explains why it didn't work out with either woman. He's obviously got his eye on you. It's not about the money, Henry, she objected. It's about the fact that we shouldn't have gotten married. I thought I loved you, but we were just children. I married you because we'd been together so long and everyone expected it of us. And I tried to be a loving wife to you, but as I got older, I realized there was something more to me, and I found it with Tom. We didn't mean for things to turn out this way. He's just always been there for me, and we hit it off. Honestly, we're surprised you never noticed how well we got along with him. I realized they were holding hands now. I noticed, I said. I just trusted my wife and best friend, oddly enough. It never occurred to me that two of the three people who meant the most to me could stab me in the back. It's bad enough you did this to me. If you fight me within custody, the gloves will come off. Is that clear? Then I guess the gloves are off, Jenny said. I'm sorry you think it has to be that way. It could have been done much more simply. Never mind. I'm sorry I'm making your total betrayal more complicated than you want it to be, bitch. You two get out of here. I'm not leaving the house I paid for every day because you decided I wasn't good enough for you anymore. I'm sure the moneybags can put you in their bachelor pad. Great, Jenny said. I already have a few things at his house. That was offensive. I'll just grab a few more things and we'll go. For that matter, Henry, I'm sorry. They were already out of range when I muttered, Everything you're saying isn't worth shit, obviously. I sat silently on the couch, staring into space. I heard them rummaging around in the bedroom for about 30 minutes. Then Tom carried the suitcase out the front door and loaded it into the car. A few minutes later, Jenny came out of the bedroom. She stopped and turned to me before walking out the door. She started to say something, but then changed her mind and left without saying a word. When Juliana got home that afternoon, I explained to her what had happened, trying not to use any derogatory language toward her mother or Uncle Tom. I didn't want to seem like I was trying to ruin her relationship with her mother. In hindsight, that's probably what I should have done, but I tried to make it as easy as possible for her and had complete faith in my relationship with my daughter. It probably wouldn't have mattered anyway. In this state, a child age 14 or older has the right to decide which parent they want to live with, as long as both parents are found eligible. Unfortunately, being a lying, cheating whore doesn't in itself make you an unfit parent, but I was sure of Juliana's love for me and that she would choose to stay with old dad. I hired a lawyer on Monday and made it clear that I wanted to get my way. He said he would do his best, but state law works against me. I'll probably be paying child support, at least until the whore marries the asshole, which I assumed would happen soon, so maybe it won't be so bad. Child support, of course, would depend on where Juliana ended up, so I was sure I'd get by without that. All the papers were filed, and 3 weeks later, there was a hearing. Jenny dropped her claim for alimony because Tom already had a higher income and they were going to get married shortly after the divorce. Perhaps she hoped this would pave the way for some level of civility. She was wrong. I sat with my lawyer and stared straight ahead of me, never once looking at her. I have no idea if she was looking in my direction. We sat in silence while the judge talked to Juliana in his chambers for almost an hour. I saw her come out and walk through the back hallway, accompanied by the female sheriff. She was obviously crying. She was probably feeling sorry for how her mother would feel when she chose me. I felt a little warmer at that thought. Finally, the judge returned and announced his decision. The petition for divorce is granted and will become effective 120 days from today, as established by state law. As previously stated, Mrs. Weston has waived her claim to alimony as well as any financial assets of the spouses in terms of money. Therefore, no alimony is awarded and all monetary assets are awarded to Mr. Weston. All in all, things were going pretty well, I thought to myself. Our cash reserve wasn't huge, but having it would be nice. She certainly didn't need it. Tom had a lot more money than I did. The judge continued. And so, we move on to the last issue before the court. Custody of the minor child, Juliana Olivia Weston. I have spent the last hour in conversation with Miss Weston. Let me emphasize that this is a very difficult situation for a child to have to choose between her parents, and her choice was made only after careful consideration of all possible consequences. At her request, I make the following ruling. Mrs. Jennifer Weston is granted custody of the minor Juliana, as well as ownership of the home, so that Juliana can continue her education in the same school district and environment. What the hell? She chose the whore over me. Apparently, she didn't love me the way I thought she did. Apparently, I had completely misunderstood my entire family, including Tom. I was naive and foolish to think that they really loved me and cared for me. It was exactly the same as with my parents. They could deal with me, use me to get what they wanted, a meal ticket and nothing more. And now, they had a better option. The judge kept talking, something about equality, child support, visitation, and other things, but I didn't hear anything, and it didn't matter. I heard nothing but the pounding of my own heart in my ears. I could hear my lawyer trying to whisper encouraging words in my ear, but it all sounded like blah, blah, blah. I was brought back to reality by a hammer blow. In a daze, I wandered down the hallway. I was vaguely aware of Juliana hugging me and whispering, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," but I couldn't do anything but stand still. The betrayal by the only three people who mattered to me, indeed, the only three people in my life, was complete. I had no one. Jenny came up behind Julianne with a look of pity on her face, while Tom prudently kept to the side. "As I promised, Henry, we'll make sure you see her as often as possible, but I think it's in her best interest." "Looks like you win some and I lose some," I said. "I'll be gone by the end of the week." Assuming I meant leaving home, she replied, "There's no need to hurry, Henry. There's no hurry. We can stay in the apartment as long as it takes. I really hope we can get over this and learn to get along with each other. You still mean a lot to me." I turned and looked at her. This time, there was a harsh note in my voice. "Don't feed me your nonsense. If I meant anything to you, this wouldn't have happened. Like I said, I'll be gone by the end of the week. Take your daughter and leave me alone." "She's our daughter, Henry," Jenny said. "She'll see you next weekend." It sounded almost like a growl. "No, she's made her choice. She chose you. Goodbye, Jennifer." I walked out without looking back. Jennifer. Tom had put his two-bedroom apartment up for sale right after the hearing and expected to sell it fairly quickly. It was a high-demand place, and he'd put a price on it to move in. Most of his belongings were packed and ready to move into Henry and I's house as soon as Henry notified the court of his full release. The main thing for us was to keep Juliana's life as it was, and Tom's apartment was in a different school district. Of course, we didn't want that to happen. We had fallen in love with each other, despite our best efforts to stop it. We didn't want to hurt Henry, but we just couldn't deny our feelings. Fate seemed to intervene to allow us to be intimate for the first time. Henry was called out of town for an emergency job that required an overnight stay, which didn't happen very often, and Juliana asked to spend the night at Danielle's house that night. I spent the night with Tom at his apartment, and it was everything we had hoped for. In my heart, I knew we were meant to be together. Over the next 2 weeks, we went out 2 more times before we finally broke the news to Henry, and all 3 times I felt for Henry more than I ever had. It had been very difficult for me to refuse Henry's advances during those 2 weeks, but I was now committed to Tom. We knew Henry would be hurt and upset, but we had faith that he would eventually recover. We never expected what actually happened. We have not spoken to Henry since the hearing. He told us that all communication had to be through his attorney. We texted his attorney to pick up Juliana from the apartment on Friday at 4 p.m. It was already 4:30, and he was nowhere to be seen. I finally called his cell phone, but found it disconnected and couldn't reach his lawyer, but I left another message. "Maybe he's lost track of time and day," I said to Tom. "I'll just take her there." Normally, Henry wouldn't lose track of such things. His job required him to be highly organized. But given everything that was going on, it would be understandable if things slipped his mind this time. Juliana and I pulled up to the house, and it looked to us like no one had been here in days. We went inside and found the house practically empty. All of Henry's things were gone, as were all of the things in the main part of the house. Juliana's room was still full, and there were a few of my things left here that I never picked up. I noticed a piece of paper on the counter. I picked it up and discovered it was a cashier's check. Attached to it was a note explaining that it was the full amount of alimony for Henry's support until Juliana graduated from high school, as required by the terms of the divorce. There was a knock on the door, and I turned around and thought Henry was standing there, but it was Mrs. Perrin from next door. "He hasn't been here in days. He took the whole house out on the lawn, and the next day, the Salvation Army truck came to take everything away. I think it was the day after your divorce hearing." "Did he give you any coordinates, Mrs. Perrin?" I asked. "His phone is disconnected, and there's no way we can get in touch with him." "Juliana, dear, could you give us a moment?" asked Mrs. Perrin, walking further into the kitchen and standing next to me. We waited until she came out. "I didn't want to say it in front of her, Jenny, but he gave me a message for you." I had a sudden sense of foreboding. I braced myself for what I was sure would be bad news. "Okay, What was the message? He said that the next time I see you, if you ask where he is, I should tell you that he will see you in hell. I'm sorry for my language, and I'm very sorry, darling, for all that has happened. Tears rolled down my face. He was gone. He paid child support, gave away everything he had that he couldn't carry, disconnected his phone, and walked away, leaving his daughter without a word. He said he was leaving, but I assumed he meant leaving the house, not our lives. He referred to Juliana as your daughter, but I thought it was just in a fit of temper. Mrs. Perrin left, and Juliana came back into the house. She saw tears streaming down my face. What's wrong, Mom? I had no other answer. Any hope that this was a mistake or that everything would be okay was gone. I felt like I had no choice but to be brutally honest. He's gone, baby. I'm sorry. Juliana flared up with anger. You did this. You drove him away, entertaining his best friend and abandoning him. My father is gone, and it's all your fault. She burst into tears. I grabbed her and enclosed my sobbing daughter in my arms. I'm sorry, sweetie. I never thought this would happen. But things couldn't go on the way they were. I wish things could have been different, but you just can't do anything about it. We collapsed on the floor of the abandoned kitchen and cried, tucked into each other's shoulders for what seemed like hours, though it was actually about 10 minutes until we were finally able to get our emotions under control. We walked back to the condo in silence, and Juliana immediately went to her room and slammed the door shut, bursting into tears again. What happened? Tom asked. He left, I told him. He donated everything in the house, disconnected his phone, left a check for the full amount of child support. I showed him the check. And he told our neighbor that if we asked where he was, we'd see him in hell. Tom, I'm scared. What if he does something stupid? We sat down on the couch and I leaned against Tom's shoulder. I just couldn't believe what had happened. Tom said, I never would have believed he would react like that. He was always the one to handle a crisis. When we were being silly and smashing beer bottles outside the school one night and then the cops showed up, we all scattered, but there was no chance of escape. He calmly set himself up to let us escape. The next day we asked him why, and he said there was no other option. They needed to catch someone. Once they did, he thought, they would stop looking for anyone else. And he said he was the most logical choice because he had a track record. He gave himself up for us. It made perfect sense to him. I knew he would be hurt, but I was sure he would realize that it made sense, and we would somehow move on. There's nothing we can do now until he shows up. Henry. What's good about being an electrician is that there's always work wherever you go. It's just a little harder to keep yourself in the dark so no one can track you down. I canceled all my credit cards and paid for everything in cash. By the time they found out the house was empty, I lived 3 states away. I was able to find a local contractor who would pay me cash in exchange for a lower hourly rate than I was worth. Since I didn't really need the money and wanted to work, I agreed. Are you on the run? He asked me. Not exactly, I replied. Not from the law or anything. I just don't want to be found. That's fine, he said. I have an ex-wife, too. I had to smile. I spent the night in my car and found a nearby truck stop where I could shower and shave. I had money to rent a room, but I didn't want to put my name on anything. Perhaps they weren't looking. After all, they had already demonstrated that they didn't care about me, especially since they had a ransom, aka child support. But who knows? With the cold weather coming on, I needed something more insulated. I found an ad for a room for rent. The owner turned out to be an older woman who told me to just call her Miss Ruth. I asked if we could get by without a formal rental agreement. She was a wise woman and realized I had my reasons. I don't need the money. I have plenty of it. I'm just looking for company and help to clean this place up a bit. How about just staying here without an appointment in exchange for you doing the repairs and keeping me company 4 or 5 nights a week? It sounded like a good deal, and I agreed. Jenny. The divorce became final in mid-January, and a week later, Julianne turned 15. She hoped something would come from her father, but the day came and went without a word. I was heartbroken to hear Juliana crying into her pillow the evening of that day. I walked into Tom and I's bedroom, which of course used to be Henry and I's bedroom. He was reading, which he did regularly. I really thought she'd hear from him. Even if he sent her to his lawyer to pass it on to us, I really thought he'd send something. Could he have completely given up on her just for choosing to live with us? That surprises me too, Tom replied. Obviously, we underestimated how much it would hurt him. But we can't let it ruin our life together, dear. Otherwise, there's no point in it. We should try to be happy and just deal with Henry when and if he decides to come into our lives again. But maybe we should consider having Juliana see a counselor. Yes, I think you're right. Since it doesn't look like he's coming back, we'll have to help her come to terms with the fact that he's gone. Henry. I was with Miss Ruth for almost 3 years, just going to work and coming home. I was home with her almost every night. I didn't feel like going out, and I certainly didn't feel like picking up a woman. It was January now, and I had celebrated my 40th birthday less than 2 months ago. And no matter how hard I tried to put my old life out of my mind, it still popped up from time to time. I knew that my ex-wife would be turning 40 in a few months. She had married Tom 2 months after the divorce was finalized, so their 3-year wedding anniversary was approaching. I had been following the wedding announcements in the online version of the local newspaper and had gotten pretty drunk the day I saw her show up. I also knew that my ex-daughter was turning 18 at the end of this month and that she was graduating from high school in June. I briefly wondered about her college plans, but quickly put all thoughts of those conniving people out of my mind, and I suddenly felt like drinking. Juliana. Juliana had been driving since she was 16, so when she turned 18 and discovered the new car we had given her in the driveway, we quietly let her pick up a few of her friends and spend the day at the mall. We got to the point where we no longer expected anything to come from her dad on her birthday, but continued to harbor a faint hope. But the day passed again, and nothing came. Juliana. Graduation day. Sitting among the 347 kids in my high school's graduating class, I quietly cried about what my life was supposed to be like. My mom and dad should still be married and sitting together, waiting for me to walk across the stage. It was one of the goals we had talked about for years, and we were supposed to share it together. Perhaps it was selfish, but that's how I felt. Of course, Mom was happy. As soon as they were able to forget at least a little about the breakup and the disappearance of their father, they got into a routine. Mom clearly loved Tom and vice versa, perhaps more than she had ever loved Dad. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that none of this should have happened. Looking around the crowd, I spotted Mom and Tom, and they waved at me as our gazes met. Not far away, I found Danielle's parents as well. They had been a great source of support during the divorce and even afterward. They tried their best to explain the pain my dad was probably feeling, but they also let me know that they didn't condone his actions. They meant a lot to me, and I was glad they were here, even if it was really for Danielle's sake. I kept looking around and saw a few more familiar faces, but suddenly one caught my eye. He was sitting closer to the back row, wore glasses, and his hair was quite long, but I was sure it was a face. I stood up to get a better look at him, but in the same instant he disappeared. Perhaps I was imagining it. Jenny. The next 4 years passed relatively quickly and without incident. Despite our best efforts, including several visits to fertility specialists, Tom and I were still unable to conceive a child of our own. I would have loved to give Tom a child, but it was just not in my power to do so. Nevertheless, we still loved each other very much and were happy that we had decided to be together. Of course, we regretted some of the consequences, but it couldn't be helped. Juliana was preparing to graduate from the University of California at Berkeley and was going to pursue a career in teaching. She had recently started dating a young man named Benjamin, and they seemed to be very good together. As is often the case when Juliana reaches important milestones in her life, I started thinking about Henry. It had been about 7 years since we had heard from him at all. We had contacted his lawyer once before, but we were told that he had no messages for us and would contact us if he ever showed up. But otherwise, he couldn't tell us anything, even though he knew where Henry was. I was comforted by the fact that we were never informed of his death, so I assumed he was still alive somewhere and couldn't help but wonder what he was doing and if he had managed to move on from the pain I had caused him. Henry. Still living beyond my means, I rented a room in a boarding house, again for cash, with no formal lease, thanks to Miss Ruth's recommendation. I was now 44 years old and remained in great shape. About a year ago, Miss Ruth started having health problems, and her family had to move her into a nursing home, and they sold her mobile home to the same family. I still worked for the same company and was paid in cash, although my salary had increased slightly. I won't say I was happy, but I was comfortable with my life. Of course, then I stopped by Denny's for lunch. I'd been here many times before, although it had been about 3 weeks since the last time, and knew the staff well. Gail, a nice black woman in her 60s who worked behind the counter and whom I'd known since I'd come here, saw me walk in. She knew my story backwards and forwards as she had been a great conversationalist over the years and promised to be discreet. She was the only person here I trusted. I headed toward the counter, but she stopped me. "Nope, Mr. Henry. Today you need to sit in that booth over there," she said. She pointed to one of the booths at the front of the restaurant. Knowing it was best not to argue with Gail, who had a reason for everything, I obediently took a seat in the second booth in the row, hoping she would someday explain her demand. Her intentions became abundantly clear when my server, whom I had never seen before, appeared. She looked to be in her early 30s. She was tall, slender, blonde, coincidentally or not, the polar opposite of Jenny, short-legged brunette and curvy, and beautiful. And she had a wonderful smile. Her name tag read, Kelly. "Good morning," she said. "How are you today?" "Much better already," I replied. I know it was vulgar, but she smiled like it was the nicest thing she'd ever heard, even though she'd probably heard it for the millionth time. I ordered my usual dish and waited for Kelly to disappear around the corner. I jumped up and caught Gail's eye. "I know what you're doing." "I hope you do," she replied. "Or you're not as smart as I thought you were." Then she went about her business. Kelly checked on me a couple times until my food arrived and then quickly set my plate down. I watched her chatting with the other customers and caught her gaze a few times as I looked at her. She seemed to feel the same connection I did. Or maybe she was just afraid I would stalk her and wanted to be able to give a good description. She approached me once more. "My shift is ending, so I wanted to wish you a good day," she said. And none of the other clients she had said goodbye to in this manner. It had to mean something, so I decided to take a chance. "Say, would you have dinner with me tonight?" Her face lit up with a wide smile. "I'd love to. You can pick me up here at 6 o'clock. I stayed in my booth until she left. She smiled sweetly at me as she walked past me, heading for the exit. I immediately headed over to the counter to talk to Gail, who I was pretty sure lived here. "So Cupid, what's her story?" I asked. Gail told me everything as she knew it. She's 35 years old and has an 8-year-old daughter, Megan. Her husband couldn't hold down a job and ran off with her best friend when the girl was only 3. Sounds familiar, I thought. She just moved here hoping for a fresh start and hadn't even dated since hubby left. I immediately thought of you. You'll be good together. I can feel it. "Does she know you set us up?" I asked. Gail only smiled mischievously. She would never tell me. I arrived at Denny's at 5:45, not wanting to be late, with flowers in hand. I sat very nervous in a booth near the door waiting for her to arrive, and promptly at 6 o'clock, Kelly appeared at my back. She was waiting in the back room. She was nervous and didn't want to wait in her apartment, she said. She was wearing a white floral print dress and pink high-heeled shoes that almost reached my height. She was wearing only a little bit of makeup, and she looked absolutely beautiful. And I told her so. "Thank you very much, that's very nice," she said. "You look very beautiful yourself." She took my hand, and we walked the 2 blocks to Maggie's Steakhouse. I know it's a romantic notion, but Kelly's hand really felt like it belonged there. Maybe it's just that it's been so long since anyone has been there, but that's not how I felt. We were seated in a double booth sitting across from each other. Gail said she was 35, but today she didn't look much older than 25. Her blonde hair was mostly loose, but she had some of it braided. I found myself in a quandary. I wanted to know everything about her, but I wasn't really interested in talking about what I used to call my first life. In my mind, the person who lived the first 37 plus years of my life wasn't really me. Or at least the me I was now. I was sometimes asked if I had children, and I always answered no, because as far as I was concerned, when Juliana chose to be my mother, she replaced me with Tom. Of course, I wish I could say that I really believed all of that, but I knew that some part of me still loved and missed her. It was just buried deep, deep beneath all the pain and anger. So to limit my exposure, I tried to keep the conversation going as long as possible. "So, how long have you been working at Denny's?" I asked. That seemed like a safe place to start. "Just a couple weeks. I've worked before, and I really like interacting with people," she replied. "And they give me day shifts, so I can work while my daughter is at school." "How old is your daughter?" I asked. I knew the answer. Gail had already told me. But I wanted to make sure I got the information directly from Kelly, and not a third party. "She's 8, and she's the light of my life," she said. "Her name is Megan, and she's so smart and beautiful. Do you have kids?" Shit. "No, I don't," I tried to say as normally as possible. And technically it wasn't a lie, because I don't have kids. As far as I knew, I used to have them, but not anymore, at least not in this lifetime. "Do you like kids?" asked Kelly. "Because any man who comes into my life has to be willing to be a father to Megan. That doesn't mean I'm after them. I'm perfectly fine on my own. But I'm not going to find myself in a situation where me and my daughter is separate from me and my husband. We're going to be a family and we're going to act like a family. Does that make sense?" "Yes," I replied, and I couldn't agree more. And to answer your question, yes, I do love children very much. Juliana's face, at least the one I'd last seen, popped into my mind without any warning. As the evening progressed, I admitted that I had been married and divorced before, but tried not to divulge too many details, explaining that I still held a lot of anger and pain about it, which was true, but was determined not to let it affect my future relationships, which was also true. We didn't prolong the conversation, we just had dinner, and then I offered to drive her home, but she again asked me to drop her off at the restaurant. "Henry, I have to admit I really like you," Kelly explained. "I felt a connection when I first talked to you at my table, and I continue to feel it today. But I can't ask you to take me home because Megan is there. My roommate is nice enough to keep an eye on her when I have to work extra hours or leave for whatever reason. But I don't want Megan to see me with anyone until I'm really ready and sure. I hope you can understand that." "I totally understand, Kelly," I replied. "I only have me, and you have her to think about. I'll let you be the guide in these matters. Can I see you tomorrow?" "I can't go out tomorrow night," she said. "I don't want to be a burden to Mrs. Pritchett. But I am working tomorrow morning, and it would be a pleasure to me if you would come and have breakfast in my office tomorrow." "Can we consider it a second date?" I asked. "I'd like that very much. Maybe Gail will let me sit with you for a few minutes, since she's set us up and all." "I wasn't sure if you knew that. I'll see you in the morning." I kissed her cheek. Kelly. I had been at work since 7 in the morning. The school has an early morning program that allows me to pick her up before I get to work. And we were busy this morning, but I knew Henry would walk through the door at about 7:45. I felt him before I saw him. All my tables were taken, so he sat at the counter with Gail until one was vacated, at which point he jumped up and took it before it was even fully vacated. I really wanted to spend time with him, but I was at work, and that was my first priority, but I was able to spare 5 minutes to sit with him. He reached across the table to me, and I took both of his hands in mine. "I'm sorry I don't have more time to sit with you." "That's okay. I know you're working. When can I take you out again?" "Like I said, I don't like to take advantage of Miss Pritchett's kindness. How about doing something in 2 nights?" I think I can wait that long too. If only I can come to breakfast and see you in the interval. You'd better. I've got to get back to work. Yeah, I have a few things I have to do today. I'll see you tomorrow. I stood up and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Thank you for stopping by my place. It means a lot to me. We both smiled widely as I walked away. Henry. 2 days later, I picked Kelly up at Denny's again, but this time we went to a country western-style bar and grill on the outskirts of town. We danced a few times, and Kelly was often invited to dance while we took a break. To my infinite joy, she declined all offers, making it unequivocally clear that she was here with someone, and all the spots on her dance card were reserved for me. It reminded me that when Jenny and I went to dances, she thought nothing of dancing with other guys, and I didn't mind. But Kelly said no on her own, no questions asked, and I really appreciated that. As the night went on, we danced closer and closer. Later, we kissed, right there on the dance floor, and she said, "I think it's time for us to go back to your place." So we did. We went back to my place and did it until she had to leave to be home by midnight, like she promised her babysitter. I refused to drop her off at the Denny's that late. Either I would drive her home or she would stay with me. Her daughter would have gone to bed by now anyway, and I didn't want to risk Kelly's safety. She let me drive her back to the apartment. Kelly. We had been together for about 2 months now, and Henry had been so patient. He came to my work almost every day, and we met about once every 3 or 4 days. Miss Pritchett assured me that she would be happy to watch Megan anytime, but I still didn't want to do it too often. We also managed to get together occasionally when I was free from work and Megan was still in school, but that was infrequent because I tried to schedule as many of my errands as possible when Megan was in school. We both realized that Gail had pushed us to meet, and we both noticed the look she would throw at us saying, "I told you so." I was really falling for him and decided it was time to take the next step in our relationship. "How would you feel about having dinner at my place tomorrow?" I said. "That would be great," he replied. "Would it be just the two of us?" I paused briefly to build tension, then smiled and said, "No. Megan will be there if that's okay with you." "Kelly, honey, I'm not just okay with it, I'm thrilled. But are you sure you're ready?" "Yes, I think it's time. She loves stuffed animals." Henry. I arrived on time, carrying a small green teddy bear in my hands. I was nervous as I knocked on the door. The door was opened by Megan herself, with Kelly standing just a few feet behind her. "Good evening. You must be Megan, the lady of the house." Megan was wearing a pastel pink dress with braids in her hair, secured with pink ribbons of the same color. Kelly was wearing yoga pants and a light sweater. She straightened her hair. It had a natural wave. "Yes, sir, that's me. Please come in." I was very impressed with her manners. "Thank you, Miss Megan. Say, perhaps you could help me with a problem?" I took the bear in my hands. "I have a friend who needs a place to live and someone to love him. He can't stay at my house. It has a very strict no-bear policy. Maybe you'll agree to take care of him for me?" Megan took the bear cub from my hands. "I have lots of friends he can meet. He'll be happy here." She ran off to deliver her new friend to the bedroom. "That was cute," Kelly said, giving me a quick kiss. "She loves plush animals. Her room is full of them, and they all have names. I don't know how she manages to keep them in order." I hugged her and kissed her even tighter, but immediately broke the kiss when Megan walked into the room. "These are my best friends," she announced. I was introduced to Isabel the raccoon, Susie the tiger, and Conrad the zebra. I shook each of their hands, paws, hooves, while introductions were made, and then Kelly asked her to please remove her friends. "Conrad?" I asked. "She heard that name in a commercial and liked it for some reason," Kelly explained. "The next friend that came into our family was named Conrad." We sat down to dinner, and the conversation was mostly led by an 8-year-old girl who really liked the sound of her own voice. But it was a pleasure to listen to her, and again Juliana's face came to mind. This time, it was the 8-year-old version of her. I felt my eyes start to mist up, and I quickly pulled myself together, hoping Kelly didn't notice. After dinner, Kelly and I sat on the couch, talking and holding hands as we watched Megan play with a few of her friends, including Bobby, the newest member of her family. Quite suddenly, Megan stopped and looked at me. "Are you going to be my new daddy?" Kelly started to interject, but I stopped her. "I'm on it, honey." I motioned for Megan to stand in front of me. "Megan, honey, I really like your mom, but I'm not going to lie to you, okay? Your mom and I are still just starting to get to know each other, and we're a long way from deciding anything. Not only that, but I have another beautiful girl that I need to convince, because if I ever marry your mommy, in a way I'm marrying you too, right? So your mommy and I will be spending a lot of time together while we decide what we're going to do. And there will also be times when it's just your mommy and me. It's not that we don't want you with us, but sometimes adults need some alone time. But as soon as mom and I make any decisions, you'll be the first to know, I promise. Is that okay with you?" "I think it's okay," Megan said. "Promise I'll be first?" I nodded. "Okay. Now can I have some ice cream?" Kelly stood up and handed each of us a scoop of ice cream, which we ate at the table. All of this brought back so many hard memories that I had tried my hardest to avoid for years. My eyes were moist again, and this time I was sure Kelly had noticed it, but neither of us said anything. Finally, it was time for Megan to go to bed. My heart increased 3 sizes when she asked me to read her a bedtime story. After a rousing version of Sleeping Beauty, I kissed her forehead and said goodnight. When Kelly and I returned to the couch, she asked about the little speech I'd given Megan about me being her daddy. "That was a great answer," she said. "Like you had it rehearsed." "Yeah, kind of," I said. I made some inquiries online about how to date a single mom and how to answer questions like that. I took their advice and thought through what I wanted to say when it came to this. I'm glad it worked out for me. "You did a great job. I think she really likes you." She put her hand on mine. "So, you're staying?" "I was hoping to, but it's your house and your little girl is in the hallway, so I didn't insist." "I really want to, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave before she wakes up. We'll just have to be careful. Is that okay with you?" In response, I took her hand and walked down the hallway to her bedroom, locking the door carefully. I paused as the memories came flooding back to me, this time of how I had behaved in a similar way when Juliana was little and Jenny and I needed some time to ourselves. I was living it all over again. Part of me was grateful for a second chance and that I could do it right this time, and part of me was terrified that the outcome would be the same. I couldn't go through that again. Everything went according to plan. Kelly and I spent about 3 hours of intimacy again. There are no words to describe making love to Kelly. Her skin is perfect and so soft. When I entered her for the first time tonight, her moans spoke clearly of the pleasure she was experiencing. She especially loved doing it missionary style, as did the fact that we looked into each other's eyes and kissed as I went in and out of her. And when she climaxes, it's felt with her whole body, making her walls clench on my shaft. It's almost impossible for her to climax without involving me in the process. When we were done, she looked in on Megan and found her sound asleep and cuddled up with her new bear friend, Bobby. I got dressed and left, pleased that it had gone so well and anticipating more time with Kelly. Kelly. I was relaxing in Henry's bed. Megan had slept over at a friend's house last night, and I had the day off today, and Henry was off to work. It's been 8 months since Henry and I met, and we are madly in love. Well, I definitely am, and I'm sure he is. I spent the night in Henry's room. We've been together almost every day during this time, and I expected him to propose any day now, and he'd get an enthusiastic yes when he finally did. I'll spend my time here until Henry picks me up for lunch, and then he'll take me home, and I can be there when Abby's mom brings Megan home this afternoon. Out of boredom, I started looking around Henry's room. He didn't have a lot of stuff, and we didn't spend a lot of time here. We were usually at my house because of Megan. This was actually only the second time I'd been here alone, and the first time had only lasted 20 minutes while he ran to the store to get milk. Standing in the center of the room, I could see almost everything. There was his home office, a small desk and filing cabinet, the full kitchen, microwave and stove on the counter next to the sink, the closet where he kept his clothes, and of course the double bed we had enjoyed using last night. I flipped through the clothes hanging in the closet. I'd worn a few of his shirts as nightgowns after he'd taken them off at my house. They always had his scent on them, and I loved inhaling it when I slept. In the corner of the closet, I happened to notice a box of papers. It didn't have a lid, and I saw that it wasn't very full, and I wondered why these things weren't lying among his other folders. I'll admit, curiosity took over. I gave it a cursory glance and noticed that all the dates were stamped years ago, even before he moved to Texas. It was a period of his life that he almost refused to talk about. I knew some things, but he didn't like to talk about it. It seemed to upset him a lot, so I didn't insist. But this was the man I wanted to marry, and I felt I knew so little about him, so I pondered whether I should take this opportunity to find out something about his past. I didn't even need to let him know what I knew. It would just be for my own peace of mind. And so, after praying that Henry would forgive me if she ever found out, I pulled out the first folder. I found a marriage certificate, which was no surprise, and a divorce certificate, which when I saw it, I was surprisingly relieved. I think part of me was worried that he wouldn't come clean about his past because he was still married. I looked up the terms of the divorce and was stunned to see that he had a daughter. Didn't he say he didn't have children? The only surprise was that he got all the money in their accounts. Custody, child support, visitation, it all seemed pretty normal. I took a closer look at his daughter's information. Her name was Juliana, and she was about 22 now, meaning she was only 14 at the time of the divorce. Maybe when he said he didn't have children, he didn't mean small children like Megan. Of course, I couldn't ask him about it, or he'd know I was peeking, but I was sure there was more behind it than met the eye. On another page, I found contact information, the phone number of his ex-wife, Jennifer. I quickly boxed everything up and put it back where it belonged. Maybe Gail knew something. She'd known Henry for years. I'd start there. Henry. I stopped by to pick up Kelly for lunch, and she didn't seem the same. Distracted is the best description. Are you okay, honey? You seem to have something on your mind. No, baby, I'm fine. Just a little tired. You wore me out a little last night. She smiled at me. I let it pass, but I wasn't completely convinced. Kelly. The next morning, I got to work early, so I had time to talk to Gail. Gail, what do you know about Henry's life before he moved here? She turned to me quickly, and there was a gleam in her eyes. When she spoke, there was concern in her voice. Why do you ask, girl? I accidentally found something in his apartment last night. Did you know he has a daughter? He told me he doesn't have kids, and he won't tell me about his past. There must be some reason he created all this separation from his old life. Kelly, baby, you need to get over it. I've known Henry for a long time. He's a good man and he'll take care of you. But if you get to that point, you might not like what happens. Trust me. Let it go. So you do know something. Please, Gail. I love him so much. Help me. She just shook her head and said, Leave it alone, honey. Let it go. Part of me really wanted to take her advice, but the more I thought about it, the more convinced I was that I couldn't do it. He came over for breakfast as usual, and I tried my best to act normal. We discussed our plans for the evening before he had to leave for work. I gave him a kiss and sent him on his way. When my shift was over, I went back to my apartment to think about it some more. Sitting in my apartment, I realized that I had to find out what made Henry leave his daughter. I had to know because I had a daughter of my own. She loved Henry like he was her father, and he seemed to love her like she was his own. And if he could keep one daughter, with the right circumstances, he could do it again. And until I knew what those circumstances were, I didn't think I could put Megan's heart at risk. I was her mother, and she came first, even above my own happiness. Since Gail hadn't said anything to me, and Henry had made it clear he wouldn't say anything either, I had only one course of action. Jenny. The caller ID said, private number. I was used to answering calls from unknown or blocked numbers, just in case it was Henry. But picking up the phone, I was no longer hopeful that it wasn't a telemarketer or some other junk like it usually was. Hello? Yes, hello. I'm trying to reach Jennifer Weston. I almost hung up. Someone who calls under my old last name is almost certainly trying to sell me something and using outdated information. But something in the tone of the voice, in its uncertainty, made me wait. Well, it used to be me, though now it's Holloway. Who's calling, please? Mrs. Holloway, my name is Kelly. We've never met, but... She took a deep breath. But I'm dating your ex-husband, Henry. Did I hear that right? I just stood there with my phone pressed to my ear, not believing what I had just heard. I thought about what I would say if something like this ever happened. But at the moment, I couldn't formulate a coherent thought, let alone words. Mrs. Holloway? I'm so sorry. Please call me Jenny. You caught me off guard. Just give me a moment, please. I hung up the phone and rubbed my face as if waking up from a dream. I wished Tom was here. He would have known what to say, or at least helped me figure it out. But he was still at work. I managed to pull myself together and picked up the phone. Kelly, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. It's just... I understand, Jenny, Kelly said. I don't know much, but I know you haven't heard from him in a while. 8 years, I replied. It's been 8 years. How is he? Where is he? He's doing well, Kelly replied. I'm sorry, but I can't tell you where he is. I get the impression he won't be too happy about it. I'm already jeopardizing my relationship by even calling you. I poked around a bit to get some information. He's never talked to me about his past. It hit me a little that he had a new life. He even found a girlfriend, but still wouldn't acknowledge our old life. Of course I understand. I'm glad to hear he's doing well. He's a very good man, Kelly. He didn't deserve what I did to him. If you don't mind me asking, Jenny, what exactly did you do to him? I guess I'm not really surprised he didn't tell you. Long story short, we were together for over 20 years, married for 16, and I divorced him to marry his best friend, who he'd known since 3rd grade. God, that sounds just awful when I say it out loud. Wow, my husband did the exact same thing to me. He divorced me from my best friend. Small world, huh? True, we weren't together that long, but that doesn't explain why he did what he did. People get divorced every day, even for reasons like yours, but they don't leave and abandon their children. There must be something else. Oh, there is. I explained the circumstances that led to Henry's departure. I don't think he saw it as abandoning his daughter, because in his opinion, she had abandoned him on her own, choosing to live with me and Tom. In fact, right after the divorce hearing, he called her your daughter and said he'd be leaving in a week, but I didn't realize what he meant. Well, I can't say I agree with what he did, but at least I can understand him a little better, Kelly said. I really didn't want to rock the boat, but I didn't know if this would be my only chance. Kelly, I know you don't owe me anything, and I'm not asking for anything from me, I said. Juliana is getting married in a few months. She's struggled to move on with her life, to come to terms with the fact that she hasn't heard from her father since she was 14, not even a birthday card. But now that her wedding is approaching, she cries constantly because her dad won't be there to walk her down the aisle. It's been a dream of hers since she was a little girl. If you have influence over him, if there's anything you can do. To her credit, she didn't lose her temper or hang up on me. She considered my question and gave me a reasonable answer, especially considering that she was the one who had a place in his life and was the one with something to lose. I'm sure you know what you're asking, Jenny. If I even mention it, he'll probably leave me and move away again. He can get a job anywhere, and he's got plenty of money. I don't see how I could even broach the subject, let alone convince him to go. Of course I understand. Maybe it's best to just let sleeping dogs lie down. Kelly, thank you so much for calling. Please keep my number. I'd appreciate it if you'd call from time to time, if you don't mind letting me know how he's doing. It would make me very happy to know that his life is getting better. I'll keep your number, Kelly said, but I honestly can't promise more than that. I hope you'll understand. Sad. I immediately called Tom at work to tell him what had happened. Did you get her phone number or anything we can use? No. Her number was blocked and she wouldn't tell me her last name. But maybe this is just the first step to something bigger. Kelly. I ended the conversation, glad I'd made it in time. I had learned a lot about what I wanted to know. But now came the question of what to do with what I had learned, if anything at all. After all, Jenny was right in that I didn't owe them anything. Why should I ruin the best relationship I'd ever had for them? But I realized that it wasn't for them. It was for me, and it was for Megan. What would I want someone to do for me and my daughter if I were in Jenny and Juliana's shoes? I would want someone to help, if only for Megan's sake. I doubted it mattered much to Jenny. She wanted it for her daughter. And what if, God forbid, something happened between Henry and me and things went wrong? Would he run away from Megan to spare himself the pain, as he had with Juliana? Or were the circumstances that caused him to leave Juliana so painful that Henry did the wrong thing? I thought back to my childhood when my father cheated on my mother and left them. Of course, Henry wasn't the one who cheated, but regardless of the reason, it was still a little girl losing her daddy. And that's when I made probably the hardest decision of my life that could have cost me the man I love. I had to give Henry a chance to right that wrong. And he was wrong to leave his daughter like that, no matter what decision she made in that moment. How else could I trust him with Megan's heart? But I couldn't just ask him that. It would be too easy for him to walk away again, while Juliana was just a name from his past. No, he needed to see her, to recognize what he'd done and who he'd left behind. The next day, after my shift, I called Jenny again. Kelly, I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Does this mean anything about Henry? She asked. Jenny, I have made a very difficult decision that I hope won't cost me Henry's love, but it needs to be done. I need to ask you for 2 favors. First, I need Julianne's phone number. Second, I'm going to tell her where it is, but I have to swear she'll keep quiet and ask you not to press her on the matter. If I have any chance of continuing my relationship with Henry, I can't let you know where he is. Maybe someday, but not now. Can you do that? Of course, replied Jenny. It's only Julian that worries me. And considering that everything you're planning requires some expense, Tom and I will pay for everything. She gave me Juliana's number and then asked for a few minutes so she could warn her daughter before I called. I waited 15 minutes before I worked up the courage to call and speak to my man's daughter for the first time and not under the best of circumstances. Good afternoon. This is Juliana Weston. Is this Kelly? Yes, that's her, I answered. Obviously, your mom explained what's going on. Yes, and she's already emphasized that anything you tell me about my father is to be kept from her. I'm sorry for the way things have turned out, but I understand, and I'm willing to do whatever you ask. You need to fly to Austin International Airport, the sooner the better. I'll pick you up there and take you to your father. You'll stay with me while you're here, and I think we'll just see what happens. Can I ask you something? Asked Juliana. Why would you risk your relationship for me? It's not like you even know me. That's a fair question, Juliana, Kelly said. I was you once, and my daughter is you now, just a girl who wants a father in her life. I just think some things are so important. I need to know the man I hope to marry, and I need him to make things right with you. While we were talking, Juliana went online and booked a plane ticket to Austin for tomorrow. She emailed me the itinerary, and I picked it up myself. Now all that was left to do was wait. Henry. I was tired when I got home from work and was surprised to find my girl waiting for me. I pulled her to me. Where's Megan? Do you really want to know? You know what, it doesn't matter, I decided. We had an amazing night. I was madly in love with this woman, even more than I was in love with Jenny, which, as much as I hated to admit it, gave me some insight into why Jenny made the decision she did. But they had done it behind my back, and that revelation did nothing to lessen my anger and hatred for them. When I brought Kelly to her apartment, I almost asked. I had the ring in my pocket and all, but I wanted it to be something more special. It was definitely going to happen soon. Closing the door, she looked at me with a look bordering on melancholy or bitterness. I hoped everything was okay. Kelly. After sending Megan off to school, I drove to the airport. I waited at baggage claim with a sign with Juliana's name on it and waited. We had already exchanged pictures, but there were a lot of people. I looked closely at all the women who looked like the one in my picture, but as soon as I saw Juliana, I knew it was her. Sure enough, as soon as the same woman saw the sign, she smiled and headed straight for me. "You must be Kelly," she said. "I'm Juliana. God, you're even prettier in person than you are in the picture. Now I see why Daddy likes you." "How sweet of you," I replied. "You're very pretty yourself. You have Daddy's eyes." Juliana smiled. "Are you ready to see your dad?" "I've been ready for 8 years. I hope it goes at least half as well as I imagined." We loaded into my little car and headed home to Marble Falls, the small town where Henry and I had settled and met. When we got to the outskirts of town, I pulled over and, putting on the speakerphone, called Rosie, the dispatcher for Henry's company. "Rosie, can you tell me where Henry is working now?" "Sure, Kelly. Hold on," Rosie replied. "He's at Bill's on the corner of 4th and Main. And Kelly, he's got a couple other things to do today, so if you're going to do him again in the back of his truck, make it quick." She giggled, hanging up the phone. I didn't have time to cut the call before that little bit came over the airwaves. I felt myself blush as Juliana smiled understandingly. "In the back of his truck, huh? Interesting." I was frisky and he looked so good, all sweaty and everything. I couldn't resist. As we pulled up to the intersection near the department store, I pointed to Henry's truck. "We'll have to wait for him to get out. I'll stand at the driver's door and you wait a few feet behind so the truck is between you and him." We waited there for about 20 minutes before I finally heard his voice talking to the department store manager as he exited the store. The time had come. I gave Juliana a thumbs up and waited. "Henry." I fixed the short in the wiring that was causing the bathroom light to flicker and headed out the door. I had 2 more calls to finish before I could get back to Kelly and Megan and maybe find the right moment to pop the question. I carried the ring with me, waiting for the right opportunity, though I would have to create one soon if one didn't present itself. As I rounded the corner where my truck was parked, I noticed Kelly's car parked behind it. Then I noticed her standing by the door of my truck. I fumbled in my pocket for the ring box and headed toward her. "Hey, babe," I called out. "This is a good, sir." Then I saw her, the other one, and all the pain and anger surged back into my consciousness. "Hi, Daddy." In an instant, I went through a whole gamut of emotions, none of which were positive. I felt the pain of betraying my family, fear of what Juliana's presence here might mean for the future, and anger at Kelly for obviously being the catalyst for all of this. I took a deep breath and then spoke sharply. "Juliana." I turned to Kelly. "I assume you found the box." She nodded. I looked at my watch. "Well, that was great, but I have 2 more jobs today and I'm burning daylight." I put the tools in the car and opened the door. "Daddy, I'm getting married." "Really?" I replied. "Congratulations." I paused, unable to suppress the anger that was burning inside me. "Try not to become a cheating whore like your mother." With those words, I climbed into the truck and closed the door. It didn't end there. Juliana stood at my window and pounded on it with her fists. "I saw you. I know you still love me and care about me because I saw you." She screamed to be heard through the glass, which I then kicked out. "What are you talking about, Juliana?" "About my high school prom. You were in the back and trying not to draw attention to yourself, but that was you. That's how I knew you still loved me." "I don't know what you saw there, Juliana, but it sure wasn't me." I started the car and pulled away. Damn it. I knew I should have cleared my life of all this, but I'd tried to be careful and save a few things just in case. And now, once again, my old life had reared its ugly head and come to destroy me. Once was not enough. I drove for about 10 minutes before I stopped to gather my thoughts. How could Kelly do this to me? I was happy as hell. I had finally, after all these years, found love, and I was happy. I should have known it wouldn't last. Happiness apparently wasn't my destiny, and this was the last time I would make that mistake. I had yet to have a man in my life who hadn't betrayed me, and there was no reason for things to be any different now. Finally, I pulled back and headed to my next job. I'd finish my calls today, and then I'd call my boss and let him know that my past had finally caught up with me and I was going to move on. He would understand. Kelly. Juliana was crying on my shoulder. For my part, I was completely shocked at how cold Henry had been. It was his own child, for heaven's sake. What she did wasn't so bad. Kids make choices like that all the time, so it was obviously more about him, the pain he was in. Henry had never been so loving toward Megan and me. It seemed so out of character for him. I put Juliana in the car and drove to my apartment. "You're staying with me for now. It was only a first try. I'll talk to him again when he gets home from work." I tried to reassure her, even though I wasn't sure of it myself. Henry. By the time I got back to the boarding house, it was 8:30 in the evening. To my surprise, neither Kelly nor Juliana were there waiting for me as I had expected. That was fortunate, as it would have made my departure smoother. Damn it. I really loved her and Megan. I didn't want to leave, but Kelly left me no choice. She'd gone out of her way to find my personal hell and bring it down on me again. Now they knew where I was and how I could trust Kelly after she'd done this to me. Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. Wasting no time, I pulled out my suitcases and started packing. All the furniture came with the room, so I only had clothes and a few personal items. The stuff Kelly had would just have to be lost. I ignored the knock on the door, but when I heard it open, I realized it had to be Kelly. She was the only one with the key. She closed the door and leaned against the wall, watching me for a few moments before she spoke. Running again? I don't have a choice. Juliana knows where I am now, which probably means... Oh shit. I assume you've been talking to Jenny. Yes, that was the only contact number in your files. Luckily, she still has the same phone number. Yeah, how fortunate. My sarcasm was obvious. I guess now you know the whole humiliating story. Great. And she walked over to me and put her hand on my shoulder. She told me what happened, Henry. But you have nothing to be humiliated about. The same thing happened to me, remember? But I let it go, lived my life, and found happiness with you. Did the same thing happen to you? I don't think so. You weren't together for 20 years. It wasn't a best friend you'd known even longer. Your daughter didn't decide to scrap you alone in favor of the people who just ruined your life. So no, it's not the same thing. My voice started to rise. Say, you know me well, don't you? Maybe you can tell me what it is about me that makes everyone I love decide to betray and abandon me? Henry, it's not... Of course it is. First, my mom cheats on my dad and walks out on us, on me. Then good old dad can't stand it and impales himself on the nearest oak tree. Apparently, I wasn't worth living for. Then the powers that be send me back to the woman who abandoned me the first time. You can imagine how I was welcomed there by a new husband who never wanted children. But at least now he had someone to take care of the yard work and bring him beer. Henry. Of course, if I wasn't quick enough to do those or other chores, I'd get a smack on the head or something, which he could get away with without leaving a mark. At least until he decided that a few marks weren't so bad and could remind me to be quicker next time. What did Mom say when she found out what hubby was up to? She thanked him for trying to make something of her worthless child, as she so memorably put it. You were wondering about the scars on my back. Well, there you go. Honey, Wait, I'm not done yet. So I'm finally getting out of there, building a successful career and marrying the girl of my dreams. I have a close friend and a daughter I adore. And for a while, I'm doing pretty well. And then what happens? Well, now you know the answer to that question, don't you? Yes, two of the three people I lived for come together to destroy me again. Two people I should have relied on and trusted take my faith in myself and crumble it. But even then, I try to keep living, keep fighting the good fight. I still have my daughter, and surely she won't leave me, right? After all, her mom and good old Uncle Tom have each other, and her dad has no one in the world, so she'll probably choose to live with me so I can have someone to help me through this. We've always been close, so of course she'll agree. Wrong again. She caught a glimpse of what the others felt in me and turned her back on me too. She chose a tramp and her boyfriend over her own father. So tell me, Kelly, because maybe you've already caught it. What is it about me that makes everyone hate me so damn much? I wandered around the room, ranting about all the shit life had thrown my way. When I was done, I was already looking out the window and turned to Kelly when she spoke up. Henry, baby, Juliana doesn't hate you. She was going through what is probably the worst trauma for a child. She just wanted a little bit of normalcy, to know that no matter what happened, she could come home and her mom would be there for her like she always was. And she relied on promises that she could see you whenever she wanted, and that would be enough. How would you want the choices you made at 14 to be held against you for the rest of your life? I realized later that she was very right about the choices she made at 14, but I was too angry to let logic get in my way now. Why the hell couldn't you just leave it alone, Kelly? I was finally happy. I had you and Megan. I had put all that shit behind me. That life didn't interest me anymore, and I left to create one that didn't have either of them in it. I was finally looking forward to the future, and now you're opening that damn can of worms again. These people are nothing to you. Weren't you happy? Just tell me why. I'm very happy to be with you, baby, and I didn't want to look for anything, Kelly explained. But I love you, and I wanted to find out about you. When I looked in the box, I hoped I would only find out a few things about you so you wouldn't be such a mystery, but when I saw that you had a daughter and that you left her behind, I had to find out why. But why? Why the hell is that? A light bulb went off in my head. Ah, I see. If he's such a horrible person that he can abandon his own child, he can certainly abandon his stepdaughter. That's what you thought, right? She lowered her head, and my answer became clear. That's just goddamn great. Well, I'll save you the trouble of worrying about it. I'll be gone by morning. I've already ruined enough lives with my presence. So now you can join the club. You can be friends with my daughter and team up with the rest of the traitors. Maybe come up with new ways to hurt me. Too bad none of you will ever have to mess with me again. At least until I stop somewhere else and someone turns me in, just when I start to think I might be happy after all. Then the vultures will descend on me again. I thought I'd made my point convincingly enough, but all I'd managed to do was piss her off. Kelly. By this point, I had had enough of his antics. I loved him with all my heart, but I wasn't going to let him talk this crap and ruin our lives. So you think everyone spends their free time trying to ruin your life? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Your daughter dropped everything to come here because she loves you and just wants her goddamn father to walk her down the aisle at her wedding so she can meet the grandkids. Your ex-wife, who you think hates the hell out of you, just wants to make sure you're okay and find some way out for her daughter. You know what, Henry? If you want to live your life in pain and anger and bitterness, that's your choice. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but I'm not going to be with a man who wants to wallow in self-pity. Okay, bad things happened to you, and I'm sorry they happened. You didn't deserve it. But bad things happen to a lot of people who don't deserve it. Did I deserve to have my husband leave me? No. But I accepted that it happened and decided to make the best of it. I had built a life with my daughter and hoped to build one with you, but apparently all you can count on is to run when the going gets a little tough. Now I was on a roll. Okay, yeah, I was worried you were going to leave Megan and me because you already did it once. But when I heard the story, I understood. I didn't agree, but I understood. But all of this could have been avoided If you had trusted me enough to talk to me and tell me about yourself. That's what people in love do, Henry. They talk. They trust. They share. I told you everything about myself, even the things I wasn't proud of, because I believed you wouldn't judge me, and more importantly, you'd take care of me. I didn't need this, Henry. I wanted this. Sometimes life and love are painful, just painful, but that's what makes them so good. So take your damn key. I threw the key at him as hard as I could, and it hit him right in the chest. It pissed me off that he didn't even flinch. Go ahead and run to find a place where you can just exist like you've existed for 7 years, instead of living like you've been living with me and Megan for the last 8 months. If that's what you want, then go find it. Walk away from the woman who adores you and another child who loves you. But I want something more, and I wanted that with you. But I think this is just another bad thing that's going to happen to me. I turned and walked out of his room without looking back, slamming that crappy little door behind me. I felt the whole building rumble from the impact, but I didn't care one bit. I wanted him to chase me and beg me to stay because I loved him so much. But I was telling the truth when I said I wasn't going to live with a man steeped in anger and bitterness. Henry. I watched as she sprinted out of the house and slammed the door behind her. Believe it or not, it was the first time I thought about the fact that I might have done something wrong. I had a right to protect myself, to shield myself from the people who trampled on my heart, right? Why did I have to obey them? It hadn't occurred to me what else I could be costing myself. And I'd already admitted to myself that I didn't want to leave. I needed Kelly and Megan. And maybe now I could get Julianne too, at least partially. Oh God, I'm gonna have to do some serious ass-kissing. I stopped my stupid packing and went outside. Kelly's little car was already gone. I could only hope she was headed to her house, but if not, I would stand at her doorstep until she got home and beg her forgiveness. When I pulled into the parking lot, her car was already there and I knew it was time. I deserved everything she had given me. I just hoped I hadn't lost her. I got down on my knees, which wasn't as easy as it used to be, took a deep breath and raised my hand to knock on the door. But no sooner had I put it down on the wood than the door swung open. Kelly leaned against the doorframe as I picked up the house key she'd thrown at me not too long ago. "What do you want?" she asked. "I'm sorry, Kelly. You were right and I was wrong. I love you and I love Megan. I can't lose you. I was stupid and angry and selfish, and I don't want to be like that anymore. I'll tell you everything you want to know if you forgive me. I need you, and I want you. Please." The silence was deafening. She looked down at me and I looked up at her. Finally, she reached out and took the key from my fingers. "Okay, Henry, I'll forgive you, but on one condition." She opened the door all the way. "You have to make things right with Juliana." I stood up and walked through the door, stopping to take her hand and kiss her cheek. She squeezed my hand in return, stopping and kissing me on the lips. Thank God we were okay. Juliana sat on the couch. She wasn't crying now, but she was obviously crying. I knelt down in front of her and took her hands in mine. It had been so long since I had held her hands in mine, and it struck me that the feeling was so foreign and yet so familiar. Emotions came over me in an instant, and my eyes glazed over before I even uttered a word. "Juliana," I began, "I'm sorry for being an idiot. I've been so angry and hurt by what your mother did that I couldn't see or think straight. After what your mother and Tom did to me, I believe that when you chose to live with them, you chose to betray me too, and there was no way I could stay after that. And so I left. I convinced myself that you wouldn't care since you chose them over me." "But Dad, I didn't—" Juliana tried to interrupt me, but I stopped her. "I know, baby, I know. But that's what I thought. That's what I felt. I was wrong. I know it now. Thank you." I looked at Kelly. Thanks to Kelly, I finally realized how wrong I was. And hopefully someday I'll be able to forgive myself. But today, I apologize to you and I promise that from this day forward, I will always be there for you. Can you forgive me, Juliana? Of course I forgive you, Daddy. I never held a grudge against you. I was just sad about what happened. I know how much Mommy hurt you. I just wanted you to talk to me first. Maybe you would have left anyway. Maybe you wouldn't. But at least I had a chance to tell you how I felt. But I forgive you, Dad. And I hope you can forgive me for choosing to live with Mom. Honey, that decision doesn't need forgiveness. I love you and always have. Yes, that was me at your graduation. We worked so hard to get to that moment that I just couldn't miss it. I saw you and I knew you recognized me. I moved to a different seat, but I was still there. I saw the whole thing, and I've never been so proud in my life. Julianne and I hugged to make up for missing 8 years of each other's lives. We pulled away from each other, and I followed Juliana's eyes to find Kelly, who was crying quietly in the corner. Juliana held out her hand, inviting Kelly into our embrace, and soon we were one large huddled mass of crying humanity. Finally, I pulled away. "Hey baby, where's Megan?" I asked. "She's in the next room with Mrs. Pritchett." I had a feeling things were going to get emotional. "Go get her, please. It's important." Kelly went out and returned a minute later with Megan. Megan ran up and hugged me like she always did when we got together. I pulled her into the other room to talk privately. "Remember," I said, "that I promised you that I might be your new daddy?" "That I'd be the first to know," she said. "That's exactly right. Look." I walked back into the living room. Kelly was sitting next to Juliana on the couch, and they were just chatting. I stood in front of Kelly and took her hands. "Kelly," I said, "honey, I want to thank you for loving me enough to do things for me that I can't or won't do for myself. You brought my daughter back to me, even when it was my fault there was so much distance between us. I know you knew how I could have reacted, but you did it anyway. You cared more about what was best for me than you did for yourself. And if that's not love, I don't know what is. And what you did for me only made me even more sure of what I was already sure of." In one motion, I pulled the ring box out of my pocket and dropped to one knee. "Kelly, my love, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Kelly's eyes widened, and her gaze immediately became moist. "Yes, baby. Yes, of course I will marry you." I slipped the ring on her finger, and then she pulled me to her and wrapped her arms around me. I looked at my daughters, both new and old. "Looks like you girls are going to be stepsisters." "Not stepsisters," Juliana corrected me. "Just sisters." That night I took my new family out to dinner, and we talked over the details of the wedding. We planned to go before the county justice of the peace as soon as possible. Neither of us wanted to wait. But that night, I started moving into Kelly's apartment. Next chapter. I thought I looked pretty good in a tuxedo. I know for a fact that Kelly looked stunningly beautiful in her light pink dress. She was 3 months pregnant and was just starting to show. The wedding was beautiful. Juliana looked like a princess, and Benjamin, don't call me Ben, was thrilled to see me and my daughter walk down the aisle. He seemed like a nice guy, though I didn't spend much time with him. But Juliana loved him, and that was the main thing. So far, I'd managed to deftly avoid direct confrontation with Jenny or Tom, though a couple times I'd glimpsed them across the room. In the last couple of days, as the final preparations for the wedding, including the rehearsal dinner, were underway, it was impossible to avoid them completely, but we were so busy that there was no time to talk. Both Jenny and Tom had put on a significant amount of weight. When Jenny was 36 and left me, she still looked amazing in a bikini, and her weight was around 115. Looking at her for the first time in 8 years, I was shocked to see that she had easily gone over 200 pounds. She said that life with Tom had been so good that she had become fat and happy. I suspected, and at the risk of sounding childish and petty, hoped she ate her guilt for what she had done to me. Kelly and I stood together, hand in hand, lost in conversation with a couple of Ben's relatives. Sorry, Benjamin, it would take some getting used to, and I didn't notice them coming up behind me. Hi, Henry. Her voice, which had previously been like a cacophony of angels in my ears, now struck me like fingernails on a chalkboard. Had her voice always been so high-pitched? I had forgiven Juliana, or rather made her forgive me, but my feelings for Jenny had not softened in the slightest, I realized. Nevertheless, for Juliana's sake, I tried to make a happy face. I turned to face her, them. Hi, Jennifer. Tom started to say something, but I held up my hand to stop him. Tom, do you remember what I said to you last time? Nod if you remember. He nodded. My feelings haven't changed. He turned to Jenny. Honey, I'll get a glass of punch. Would you like anything? She shook her head. No. Kelly added. I'll join you, Tom. I could use a drink. It was an obvious ploy to leave Jenny and I alone, and I watched them until they were out of sight. Once they were gone, we stood in silence for a while. I could have stood for ages without speaking to her again, but apparently that wasn't on the agenda. She spoke first. I was hoping that after this much time, things like this wouldn't happen anymore. I guess I was wrong. Wrong. Is there something you want, Jen? Yes, Henry. I want us to get through this. I want us all to be friends. Kelly is beautiful and you're so happy together. You're going to be a daddy again. I'm already a daddy again, I reminded her. I was referring to Megan, who I was going to adopt, which Jenny had been made aware of as early as yesterday. Yes, of course. I meant that even though we've been through a painful journey to get here, we're all happier than we were before. So I was hoping we could put the hard feelings behind us and move forward, if not as friends, at least in a friendly way. I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed, Jen. Do you know how much I loved you back then? She nodded. And just as much as I hate you and Tom now. And it hasn't made it any better. But why, Henry? It's been over 8 years. I realize we could have handled it better, but why is it still so strong? Then I'll try to explain it to you. First of all, I don't think I ever told you that my mother cheated on my father relentlessly. She would make her boyfriends pick her up from the house while my dad and I played games or whatever. My father tried to get her to stop, but she wouldn't, and he put up with it until she left him completely and divorced him to marry one of them. Shortly after that, he killed himself. I didn't know that. You told me your father died of a heart attack. Well, the truth confused me a little. But that's just the backstory. Jenny, I loved you and was in love with you. You were everything I ever wanted, and not once did you even suggest that I wasn't that for you. I thought we'd grow old together, enjoy grandchildren and everything else. But those dreams were shattered, and you made it clear that I was never what you really wanted. I would have agreed since I could support you, and you wouldn't have to work, but apparently you were open to someone you thought was the best, even if you weren't actively looking. Do you have any idea how inadequate I felt? I felt like I'd wasted my life. I'm sorry. It's not that I didn't love you, Henry. I did. I just... not like that. I couldn't help how I felt. That's true, and if that was all it was, I might have been able to get over it. I've had exactly 3 people in my life who meant something. I don't work in an office where I make friends with coworkers. I go to work every day, get in my truck alone and go fix things for people I don't know and probably won't see again. Every day I had lunch alone, unless I had a job close to home so I could come home and eat with you. Then I would come home from work and spend all my time with the wife I loved, the daughter I adored, and the best friend who knew me better than anyone else. And then, in one sentence, 2 of the 3 people I loved and trusted destroyed almost everything I thought I knew. They did it together, and they did it on purpose. Henry, we didn't mean for this to happen. But you didn't stop it either. You decided you would reach for the ring and not care about the consequences. Do you have any idea how long it took me to even think about trusting a woman again? But even that wasn't enough for you, was it? It wasn't enough that I lost my wife and my best friend. No, you had to take my daughter as well. Juliana made that choice on her own. Bullshit. Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't push for her to stay with you. I raised my voice. Honey, I know it's going to be weird having Tom here instead of Daddy, but at least you'll be able to see me when you get home from school. And I promise you'll be able to see Daddy as often as we can. Tell me that nothing like that ever happened. She couldn't, and she knew it. I continued. No, you just had to have it all. Your selfish, greedy ass just had to have it all, but with the man you really wanted. Why should your life change, right? Sure, you just destroyed the man who loved and supported you for the past 16 years, but who gives a shit about him if you get what you want? Have you ever thought about telling your daughter, this is going to be really hard on your dad? At least Tom and I will have each other, so I think you should live with your dad so he won't be lonely, and we'll see each other when we can. I already know the answer to that. Not once. You're right, Henry. I guess I didn't think about things like that. Still, you disappeared without a word. What the hell did you think I was going to do, Jennifer? I didn't have anyone. My whole family was gone, and my daughter was convinced to go along with it. What was I supposed to do? Sit at home alone for 12 days out of 14, knowing that my life went on without me on the other side of town. My wife and my daughter in my house, only instead of me, my wife was having fun with my best friend. Just pushed me out and hooked up with him. We ran into each other on the street, and I could see everything I had lost. Did you really expect me to stay there and relive it every day for the rest of my life, just to have a few days a month to be with the kid who threw me to the curb? As far as I was concerned, I had exactly two options: cut all ties and leave, or put a bullet in my brain. And frankly, I doubted which one I'd choose, even as I distanced myself from her. When I asked Mrs. Perrin to tell you that I would see you in hell, it was because I expected to get there very soon. I even had a gun. Gee, Henry, I had no idea. Of course you didn't know. You were too busy with your life, our life, not caring about anything in the world to give a damn about me. You replaced me with the guy you wanted and talked your daughter into staying with you. You had everything you wanted, and you didn't care about me. I even told you after the hearing I'd be gone in a week. I didn't mean I was leaving home. I didn't mean leaving the neighborhood. I meant death. And did you ever express concern or ask what I meant? No. Eventually, I realized I wasn't going to give you the satisfaction. I didn't kill myself because I realized I hated you and that bastard enough to stay alive. Henry, Unfortunately, I continued, as if her mouth had never moved, I let my hatred and anger cloud my judgment when it came to Juliana. When she decided to live with you, I thought she was taking your side and wanting Tom to be her father instead of me, so I overreacted and left without another word. I wish I could blame it completely on you, but I will take most of the blame for this. It cost me 8 years of her life that I can never get back. Thank God there was finally someone who actually loved me enough to think of my best interests, even perhaps to the detriment of their own. But you don't know anything about that, about putting someone else first. Who knows how many more years I would have lost if Kelly hadn't pulled my head out of my ass. And I intend to spend the rest of my life showing her how much I appreciate it. Now, do you see why I continue to hate you? I think I do, Henry. I was hoping time would make a difference, but it didn't. All I can say is that I regret the way we acted. It may take a little more time, but I won't bother you about it anymore. Can we at least agree to be civil? Of course. We still have a daughter in common, and while I'll do my best to avoid you, I realize that's not always possible. In those moments when we have to be in the same place, I will be able to treat you at least as well as a stranger on the street. Just make sure your husband never speaks to me again, or you will be left a widow. Epilogue. Henry. Over the next 2 years, I slowly bought out my boss as he walked toward retirement. I became the largest electrical contractor in Marble Falls and one of the largest in Central Texas. I was still out on calls a couple days a week, but I mostly switched to running the business from the office, and my lovely wife and 10-year-old daughter became my employees. Kelly handled appointments, I handled HR and projects, and we did paperwork together. Megan was an absolute joy and absolutely loved her new baby sister, Katie. As luck would have it, a year after the wedding, Benjamin was offered a promotion in the Dallas office. It's still about a 4-hour drive from us, but we get to see them about once a month for a weekend. They seem very happy and are expecting my first grandchild next year. I wish I could report that something terrible had befallen Tom and Jenny, other than their rapid weight gain, but it hasn't. Although I'm not interested in hearing about them, Juliana keeps Kelly informed about their lives, and Kelly mentions something to me from time to time. Kelly doesn't hate them like I do. Why would she hate them? She actually appreciates them for what they've done because it brought us together. She sends them a thank you card every year on our wedding anniversary. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.